I started my business. I was really, really, really busy. I was just working, I felt like 7 days a week, 24/7. And I think that's pretty common for entrepreneurs that are in the business that they love, right? We're workaholics, we're working hard, we're doing a ton of things. And we were celebrating my daughter's birthday. And I looked at her and I said, oh my goodness, where did the last 2 years go? And I felt like she grew the last 2 years. And it's almost like I wasn't there for her last 2 years. Now, to be fair, I was physically there, but mentally and emotionally, I was probably thinking about the business most of the time. We'd be watching a movie and I was playing a different movie in my head. And I just felt, oh my goodness, I really missed out on 2 years of her life. And I did not want her to be 20 years later, and I was in that same state of mind. So I made a very private decision. I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to work weekends anymore, and I was going to try to minimize during the week work so that I'm home on time for dinner and, spending the evening with my wife and my kids. Hello and welcome to the Yeti Club podcast, where entrepreneurs are the real heroes. On this podcast, we discuss tools, concepts, and ideas that are practical and inspirational for the entrepreneur. To learn more, go to www.riadi.me. That's RIADI.me. Thank you, and I hope you find this episode helpful.
Hello entrepreneurs, this is Ruba Al-Tijani and welcome to Yeti Club without Qaqish. Today we're going to talk about the freedom and the entrepreneur. We usually don't associate the word freedom with entrepreneurs, but freedom is probably one of the highest values for the entrepreneur. Dawood, tell us more. Why is that important for the entrepreneur listening to us?
Well, hello, Ruba, and I want to welcome the entrepreneur. And as Ruba said, the title of this session is Freedom and the Entrepreneur. And for you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a future entrepreneur, or a current entrepreneur, you may have not thought about this, but freedom is probably one of your highest values. And one of the things that sadly happened to a lot of the entrepreneurs is you've actually, even though freedom is one of your highest values, you've actually become hostage, or you've become a slave to your business. That could be you're a slave to, you just don't have time to do something else. You're spending all your time in the business working 7 days a week. So you wanted to be free. You end up working 7 days a week, 24/7 a day. Or money, right? You became an entrepreneur, so you have a freedom of money, and you end up making less money than you were making before, and it can drive you crazy. And then, there's some other areas. And so some of the areas of freedom I talk about is freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and freedom of purpose. And when I talk about things like freedom of relationships, as an entrepreneur, are you working with the people that you love to work with? This could be both internal team members and externally customers or clients. So are your customers that you love working with, or are your customers a pain in the butt? And one of the things I'd like to remind you, whether they're great or whether they're a pain in the butt, you're the one who attracted them in the first place. And then also, and and the really big one is freedom of purpose, and I think this is where, as an entrepreneur, are you pursuing your purpose in life, or are you just busy making money as an entrepreneur? Think about what I just asked, right? Freedom of purpose. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a person, are you pursuing your purpose in life, or are you just busy making money? And you start thinking about that and you're like, wow, it's a deeper question, right? It's almost like a philosophical question. Anyways, these are some of the freedoms we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the 4 freedoms: the freedom of money, time, relationships, and purpose. We're going to talk about freedom from status, freedom from retirement, and then we're also going to talk about freedom from as opposed to freedom to, which is a pretty cool concept. So these are the kind of things we're going to talk about. And by the end of the session, you're going to learn a lot about these different freedoms. And again, you may have not fully thought about these concepts, but they're going to help you live a more fulfilling and meaningful life. It'll help you become a better entrepreneur, live a better life. And on top of that, you can 10x your business, you can 10x your life. And to be clear, when I say 10x, that doesn't necessarily mean 10x sales. It could be if you want to 10x your sales, if you want to 10x your profits, or you want to 10x your free time. It's up to you. Fill in the blank. What do you want 10x of in your life? And these are the things that we're going to help you do that. And these are the freedoms we talk about. And again, as I said, sadly, and for me, for part of my life, as an entrepreneur, I wanted freedom, but I did not have these freedoms. I was actually hostage to my business. So, Ruba, I'll come back to you before I talk about this, and then I'm just going to dive right into the four freedoms of time, money, relationships, and purpose.
You're absolutely right, David. I mean, the more entrepreneurs I meet, the more I realize that I'm not the only one who's chasing freedom in certain things. The type of freedom that you chase might be different in the different stages of your entrepreneurial life. So let's say maybe someone has started because they want to have a freedom of money, but then they're realizing that, no, I also need to have a freedom of purpose, or like as the business grows, as it goes to a different stage, you start to want to look for a different type of freedom. But nevertheless, freedom in general is the highest value that entrepreneurs are after, regardless of which stage they are in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because as an entrepreneur, I never really associated the word freedom with entrepreneurship. But when I took a step back and I heard somebody talking about that, I said, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I wanted as an entrepreneur, freedom. And I've kind of broken out, I talk freedom in general terms, but there are very specific things that we're going to talk about today that I outlined earlier. And I'm going to dive right in. Ruba, I've shared this story with you and with others. I never really shared it until many years later. It's the story of, I started my business. I was really, really, really busy. I was just working, I felt like 7 days a week, 24/7. And I think that's pretty common for entrepreneurs that are in the business that they love, right? We're workaholics, we're working hard, we're doing a ton of things. And we were celebrating my daughter's birthday. And I looked at her and I said, oh my goodness, where did the last 2 years go? And I felt like she grew the last 2 years, and it's almost like I wasn't there for her last 2 years. Now, to be fair, I was there. I was physically there, but mentally and emotionally, I was probably thinking about the business most of the time. We'd be watching a movie and I was playing a different movie in my head. I was physically there, but I'm not sure I was fully present. And I just felt like, oh my goodness, I really missed out on 2 years of her life. And I did not want her to be 20 years later, and I was in that same state of mind. So I made a very private decision. I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to work weekends anymore, and I was going to try to minimize during the week work so that I'm home on time for dinner and, spending the evening with my wife and my kids. Eventually I got there, and, the first thing I cut out was the weekends. I'm like, I'm just not going to work the weekends anymore. It's just not worth it. And actually, I remember I made a promise to myself. I said, look, if this whole thing doesn't work out, I said, screw it. I'm just going to go back and I'm just going to work a corporate job again. It's not worth it for me to lose out on my kids and my daughter, not seeing her grow and spending time with her. But what's amazing is that, within a year, I had basically accomplished that. I was off every weekend. I wouldn't work on the weekends. If there was an emergency, sure, I'd go ahead and I would work on that weekend and take care of that. But it was very rare that ever happened. And then almost every evening I would be home, spending time with my wife and my kids and, be able to do things together and things like that. So for me, that was changing and I loved it. I'll never go back. But even now, what's amazing, Ruba, is I meet people 20 years later, 30 years later, they've been an entrepreneur, and they still don't have the freedom of time. So they're working in a business that they love. They're an entrepreneur, they're a business owner, but it's almost like really hard for them to take a week off for vacation or 2 weeks off vacation or, whatever that is. The whole business they might feel like is going to collapse if, they're not in the business itself. And I didn't realize it was that big of a deal, but it's really, really, really amazing. And I'm talking about high performing entrepreneurs, right? I'm not talking about like your lazy neighbor or, somebody that, works a regular job and doesn't care about his job. I'm talking about a high performing entrepreneur that really cares about his business or her business and loves their business. And it's just, it's a form of addiction. That entrepreneur is a workaholic, but society rewards them for that, right? You're working hard, you're doing all these things, but on the other end, do you really have that freedom of time? So my question for you as a listener is, if you're an entrepreneur, do you have a freedom of time? Are you able to take free days on a regular basis? So for example, and it doesn't have to be a weekend, but in my case, it's the weekend because of the type of business I'm in. Are you able to take 1 or 2 days off each week? Are you able to take time off on a quarterly or on an annual basis? And this time is really important because this is time that you want to rejuvenate. And if you think about elite athletes, right? And I'm talking about, World Cup, Olympics, things like that. In their schedule, they train really hard, but they also have time for recovery because they realize that their body actually needs to recover. For you as an entrepreneur, are you doing that, right? Maybe another way to look at that is think of yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, that you are a high-performing car. You need to fill in gas on a regular basis. You need to get an oil change every 3 months. You need to do a tune-up once a year, right? These are things that you do for your car so that you can maintain your car and have a high-performing car. So my question for you, are you doing that to yourself as an entrepreneur? It's specifically when it comes to freedom of time. And so anyways, the big thing too, and I heard this and it really resonated with me. Yeah, it really did. Are you taking time off on a regular basis? If not, you're actually costing your business money, and some are arguing it's as high as 20%. Because if you're burnt out and your leadership team is burnt out and your team is burnt out, you are not able to produce as much. So in reality, maybe to think about this is if you're not taking that time off to rejuvenate, you're probably costing your business 20% in terms of maybe revenue or profit or something like that. So anyways, what I had talked about here is the freedom of time. So for about 2 years of my life, I didn't have that. And I made a very private decision that I'm sharing with you and others now to get that freedom back. But there are 4 freedoms, and this is something that Strategic Coach talks about. The 4 freedoms are the freedom of time, the freedom of money, the freedom of relationships, and the freedom of purpose. And I'm going to talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail, but we just kind of covered the freedom of time. And Ruba, I'll come back to you before I talk about the freedom of money.
David, every time I hear this story, it touches me because I just feel like it is such a moment. And you were lucky. You were one of the few lucky people who realized how much they're missing out on that balance, because you said like you felt like you were not present, like you were not there. Physically, you were there, but actually you were somewhere else. You had a different movie in your head. You were planning and you were stuck. So was your business at the stage where you've already had created the systems that you were like, okay, now that I have the systems, then I'm good to take a few days off? Or was it, okay, nothing's too urgent. There is no decision that cannot wait for like at least a day or 2 days until I take it. So let me take this easy because my priorities are clear.
Yeah, I mean, it was in the early stages of my business, right? And even then, in the early stages, you don't know whether or not the business is going to make it.
It was just like 2 years?
Yeah, within 2 years. Yeah. So it was within the first 2 years. And obviously, I also talk about seasons, right? There are seasons in life where, you got to get certain things working and up and running and maybe you invest more time. But to answer your question, it was in the infancy stage of the business, right? And so it was in the early years of the business. So within 2 years, I mean, we're way past that point right now.
What did you do with all the urge and all the rush, like to just check your email, to follow up with a client, to chase an opportunity? What did you do with all that?
That's a really good question. Ruba, I love the questions that you ask me because it forces me to think about that period of time. Because again, I wasn't sure if the business was going to make it or not, right? The first 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you said it's in the infancy, so that's quite in the beginning and you're not sure about so many things, but I mean, how to just take a step back and say, okay, let's have it systemized. I mean, it's still not systemized at that stage.
Yeah. To answer your question, there was nothing stopping me from going in and working 7 days a week and saying, okay, let me just keep on working and doing this thing. But, I don't know what happened, call it divine interference or a mystery or, whatever it is. Something happened to me. I mean, it's funny because you remember the day, you remember the birthday party. I mean, I remember these in distinct details, right?
It was a huge aha moment, right?
For me, yes. And very private, very personal, right? Just, call it providence or divine intervention or, whatever it is. I don't know. I just looked at my daughter and I said, oh my goodness. If I'm sacrificing, my daughter for my business, it's not worth it, right? I mean, that's probably the thought that I had.
So you had your priorities set, because a lot of people will be like, yeah, but I'm doing this for them. I'm doing this for my family. So then it's okay.
No, I didn't justify it that way. Yeah. I mean, you're asking me how I thought about that. And I mean, these are really
Yeah.
great questions because looking back, it's a lot easier. But when you're making that decision and, it's an inflection point in your life, do you take path A or path B? And I chose path B. Now, to be fair, I wasn't saying, hey, I'm going to, forget work. I'm going to, stay home 7 days a week or anything like that. It was more of saying, hey, listen, my priorities are out of whack. I'm spending way too much time in the business. I love the business. I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm building. However, I do need to make sure that I spend time with my children. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure I would use the word balance because, the word balance sometimes means that, one day here, 2 days there and things like that. I needed to integrate that, right? I needed to make sure that I'm taking care of the business, but also I'm not forgetting to take care of my kids, right? And spending time with them and investing with them because I'm never going to have that time back, right? So I don't know. Did I answer your question or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I have few questions on that because
Sure.
I feel like that's a very brave decision that you've made. You've been through a private moment, but you still made a very brave decision, though there was a lot of uncertainty connected to it. So do you feel like you're missing out on any like work opportunities?
Probably the biggest thing that took me a while to not do was to just stop checking email, right? That was the biggest thing. So to answer your question, no, I didn't feel like it was because I'm in a B2B environment where most of the business is during the week, but like strategy and catching up, I could use the weekend for a lot of things that I wanted to do and things like that. What it actually forced me to do, and I've always been and always have and always will be a big believer in the team concept. The formula that I use is, most people say 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. And I say, you know what? I throw that formula out the window. I say when we have 3 people, it's 3 to the power of 3. So it's 3 times 3 times 3. We're able to accomplish 27, not 3. And so for me, I've always believed in the power of a team. And I think that forced me to become a better entrepreneur by taking time off. And for me, it was 2 days a week. Like I made it, and it's funny because I looked around and I said, hey, listen, let me look at all the advanced countries around the world. The vast majority of them are super advanced countries, and they're taking 2 days a week off, right? And I said, well, why am I not doing that, right? I mean, why am I working 7 days a week? And again, to be fair, if there was an emergency or something, I'd put my personal life on hold and, would go take care of the emergency. But it was very rare that happened. And I would still check email. And then I just got to the point where I set up, actually, so to answer your question, it forced me to set up a system where the business wasn't dependent on me and things worked without my involvement, which is great as an entrepreneur because now you're designing the work. You don't necessarily need to be the person doing the work, if that makes sense. So I designed a system that worked without my interference. And so if there was an emergency or there was something we had to do on the weekend or after hours, we could take care of it. I didn't need to be that person doing that. And so it actually forced me to do that. So in a way, it forces you to actually be even more creative and it doesn't depend on you.
Right. So it was that moment that made you realize, and it was kind of like the trigger of, okay, I need the freedom of time because I'm not having it.
Yeah. And I wasn't sure I was thinking about it in those terms, but that's ultimately what it was. Now looking back, that was exactly what it was. I was essentially, and many entrepreneurs are there, I was hostage to my business. I was a slave to my business and my time. Even if I wasn't physically in my business, I was thinking about my business, right? I'm watching a movie with my daughter and I'm not watching that movie. I'm playing a different movie in my head, right? That's not fair to my daughter. That's not even fair to me. I wasn't even enjoying the movie. I didn't know what was going on, right?
You're just there like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we've all been there, right? I mean, as parents, we've all been there. Yeah.
I mean, but that's what happens when you're like starting something new and you're crazy about it and you're like, okay, but you're just open to it. So that's why I think your decision, it was not just enlightened, but it was also a brave decision to make.
Yes. And brave is a key word because I could have not made that decision. And to be fair, it was in the infancy stages. We didn't have all the systems in place and, I was building a business and all that stuff. But I made a decision where I said, no, I need to be spending time with my kids where I'm fully present, right? And that's going to be different for every person. But Ruba, what I find amazing is, I mean, to this day, I meet people, they're entrepreneurs, highly driven, highly ambitious, very accomplished. They find it really hard to take time off and be fully present. And it's,
Absolutely.
again, they're involved in a business that they love. And again, society and everybody else rewards them for that, right? But I go, listen, you need to have something going on for you in your life outside of your business. So here's a couple of other things. You didn't ask this, but as you were asking, it occurred to me, I wasn't eating well. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't exercising, right? So what was happening is there were so many other things that I was not doing. And I'm at the point now of my life where I say, hey, listen, there's 3 things that are critical for me to be a better entrepreneur. I need to eat well, I need to exercise, and I need to sleep well. I do those 3 things, and I am that much better as an entrepreneur. I am that much better as a person, as as a husband, as a father, as a brother, as a son. And so those 3 little things that have nothing to do with business have a really big impact. And those are things that I ignored because I just didn't have the time to do that. I didn't have time to go to the gym and work out, right? Or at least that's what I thought. Now I say, hang on. I don't have time not to do that, right? Now it's affecting me negatively if I don't work out or if I don't eat well or if I don't sleep and things of that sort. So it's a shift, but I am amazed at how many people live their entire life, their entrepreneurial life, and they still don't have that freedom of time. And maybe they think they do, but I'll put it to you this way. Can you leave your business for 2 weeks and go on vacation and not check email and not do anything, and your business will run? If you do that, fantastic. You've got a lot of freedoms, and especially the freedom of time. If you don't, you can start thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great thing. And yeah, I have also met a lot of people, David, who are, working in their own business and they don't have, that's why I called it balance. They don't have any time off. They're not doing anything else. So it makes you question, like, what is the point? When is all that going to end? And they will always tell you, like, I'll just wait and until it's on a stage that it can run without me. But that is a mindset, right? Because to be confident that it can run without you, you need to have the right people, you need to have the right systems, and then you need to have as well trust in these people. And then you just need to like do this shift in your mind. So it happens, I feel like it happens inside at the beginning. That's really the best step, the point of realizing that, okay, what are my priorities? How much do I want to give to this? And how much do I want to give, like you said, to other aspects of my life, to my health, to maybe to fun, to energize, to recharge yourself, your family, maybe extended family, other responsibilities. Yeah. But it's very tricky, and especially it is because you're doing something for yourself and you're building, and there's just that rush of, let me do this and let me put this here, and okay, what happens next? And I have this challenge, and I just met this person who's able to help me. So there is all this rush, and just to be able to like stop yourself and say, okay, there is another, and I would call it fun. There is another type of fun, because this is fun, right? You're actually enjoying it.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
So there is another type of fun to just like stop yourself from this fun and just like look at other important aspects. Yeah.
There's a great question that was asked, and it said, do you own your business or does your business own you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And sadly, what we see is many people think they own a business when in fact the business owns them.
But the business owns them.
Fascinating. Now, the other side effect, as you were talking, this occurred to me, is I became I don't want to say a very boring person, because I like to think of myself as an interesting person, but
maybe for someone observing from the outside, it feels like
I'm a much more interesting person now that I pursue other passions and do other things in my life besides being just focused on work and my business 7 days a week, right? So I'm back to playing my sports again, basketball, soccer. I'm back to reading. I'm back to traveling. So I'm doing all these other things that I basically put on hold for a while. And there's nothing wrong with putting certain things on the shelf when you're in a specific season of a business or a specific season of life. But I think what happens is when it comes to freedom and freedom of time, it's more of a habit. And is it a habit that you have? Because guess what? I'm not sure that you're going to change 20 years later, 30 years later. It's just going to be a bigger and more exciting opportunity. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's what kind of entrepreneur do you want to be, right? And I'll stop there because I can get into
like you want to be a slave. Like you answered this, like what kind of entrepreneur do you want to be, right? Do you want to own a business or do you want your business to own you? For me, the freedom of time was as well as the trigger, but that's what got me into like full-time entrepreneurship because I was already having like a side business. But it wasn't until I had my son that I realized like, okay, I need my time. Because when I was working in the corporate, I had no problem to work like 12 hours. I mean, why not? I was enjoying it. It was fun, right? I could do it. I could do it for long time, long hours. But when I had my son, I realized like, okay, there is another type of fun. There is another thing happening in my life. And I think a lot of maybe mom entrepreneurs would be able to relate to this because something like just an aha moment happens. Like my son I would leave him the whole day and he would be raised up by strangers with a babysitter or in a kindergarten. And I don't know anything about him. And I'm just there doing something else. And I'm spending my time with other people. So for me, that was really the trigger of like, okay, I need some freedom of time and I need the type of business that will give me that freedom of time. Like I don't want to have a classic type of business where I have to be at work 8 hours a day, for example, even. That's why I'm like more into like the online business. It will give me some time to as well be with him. So yeah.
Yeah, and freedom of time will mean different things to different people.
Absolutely.
As the listener listens now, Ruba's definition of freedom of time is very different than my freedom of time, right? My freedom of time is working during business hours and then not working on weekends and on the evenings. I don't necessarily care to be home with my kids during the day because they're at school or my wife is with them. That's my definition of my freedom of time, right? Which is different. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs that love the business that they work in can relate to this. I'll share this story and then we can talk about the freedom of money. I was talking to another entrepreneur and he loves the business he works in and I love the business I work in. And I shared something with him and I thought it was pretty funny. He goes, I keep forgetting to go home at the end of the day because, I'm working and I'm immersed in my work. And then my wife calls me and I'm late and, this and that and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I can't remember his name right now, but I was telling him, hey, here's what I did that worked well for me. I set an alarm on my iPhone at the end of the business days. And then I only get up to 30 minutes to snooze and then I leave. And I told him, I love the work that I do and I get so immersed in it that I forget to leave like you. And so rather than expect a phone call from my wife to remind me, I set up an alarm on my iPhone. And he goes, oh my goodness, that's genius, and he started doing that. And now his wife doesn't call him to remind him to come home, right? Now, that alarm, it's a simple, stupid little thing, but it has a really big impact. But the testament there is there's a lot of us out there that we love what we're doing. And how can we set it up so that, hey, we still take care of some other priorities in our life? How do we do that? So I wanted to share that story because, again, this is not like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to get out of here. This is, oh my goodness, I have to force myself to get out of here, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. I feel like that's the beauty of it because what was like my theory? Remember, I was asking people, do you enjoy what you're doing? And I never believed that anybody enjoyed what they were doing, like in the corporate life. And the only one that I found who really enjoyed what he was doing was my dad. And I didn't even believe that he really enjoyed it. I was like, yeah, he's just telling me this. So yeah, when you find something that you love, it would be very difficult to stop doing it.
Yeah. So, all right, fantastic, Ruba. This is all really exciting stuff. So you thought your dad was just being nice to you. Absolutely. And the funny part is, if you've been around a lot of people that are miserable, right, or that are not happy, it's hard because, as we've talked about, there's a pandemic of, a dead man working, right? They're working, but they're dead on the inside, right?
You would think that's normal because
Yeah.
everyone around you is miserable doing what they're doing. So you would think, yeah, of
Yeah.
course, that's life,
Yeah.
right?
And to be fair, that's probably 80, 90% of people that are out there, right? I don't know who it is, but I pay attention to the 10%. Hey, who's loving the work that they do, right? Who's doing really well, and you pay attention to that.
It's funny. It's funny that you said that because I don't think about it that much anymore because I mean now I know that you can be enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I don't even think about not being happy doing whatever I'm doing. That's so it's funny
Well,
that you mentioned it.
yeah, well, how it's like sometimes you're around maybe, family or friends and, they're just complaining about work or this or that. And the immediate thing that goes through my head is, well, you're not a tree. I mean, change your job, change your work, change, like stop complaining and go do something about it. Right. And like you, Ruba, I've surrounded myself more and more with people that actually love what they're doing. So now it's strange when I meet somebody that hates what they're doing. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? I mean,
exactly.
go do something
Like
else.
it just feels a little bit weird. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it. Just now I realized that, yeah, that's not a reality for me anymore, right? Doesn't feel normal that someone is doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. The four freedoms: freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and freedom of purpose. And we've been talking a lot about, we're kind of mixing all four, right? But we talked about freedom of time. Now I want to talk to you about freedom of money. There's a really great book that a friend of mine recommended. It's a great title. I just started reading it, and there's some great insights in it. It's called Making Money is Killing Your Business. And we'll have to put that in the show notes. But the title of the book is Making Money is Killing Your Business. Now, what's fascinating here, and of course, you need to make money, and it's important for you to make money. Money and profits are the lifeblood of a business. If you don't make money or you're not profitable, you don't have a business, right? So that's really important. But what's interesting is money is not the soul of your business. And the soul of your business is, what is that freedom that you want, the freedom of purpose? And so you can think of the soul of your business as being your purpose, your passion, your mission, whatever it is that you want to call that. And so the freedom of money, the whole idea is, and it's important to do this, right? And I don't want to underestimate this. It's important to get to the point where, you're making money, your business is profitable, and you're able to do that. But your business is not just about making money, because if it was just about making money, there's some really creative ways to go out there and steal money. Maybe you can rob a bank, maybe you can rob people, but those people are not entrepreneurs, right? And so when I talk about freedom of money, is you get to the point where you're making money, but now you've got the freedom for more than just money. So I just wanted to talk about that concept, and I don't want to underestimate the concept of making money. I mean, obviously, as an entrepreneur, it's important that you make money. It's also, and maybe I'll go off on a tangent a little bit because this is important. Making money is not a selfish thing. Making money is not greed. Making money and having a profitable business is really important because you can't do anything else if your business is not profitable and if your business is not making money. And one of the things that I see out there as entrepreneurs is we are very selfless. And, we'll pay everybody before we pay ourselves. We'll pay our employees, we'll pay our vendors, we'll pay our rent, we'll pay, electricity, we'll pay all that stuff. And then we pay ourselves last. And I grew my business for a couple of years where I was even making less and less money. And it drove me crazy because I'm like, what's the point of growing this business? And I changed the whole formula. And we have a separate session on this that dives into it. But as an entrepreneur, you want to get to the point where you pay yourself first. And so out of every $100 of revenue that you get, you want to take something like $10 and pay yourself first. And I'm just using this as an example because you don't want to pay yourself last. And now, so if you take $100 that you have in revenue and you pay yourself $10, now you've got $90 to pay your employees, to pay your rent, to pay electricity, vendors, and things like that. And you want to change that equation. And again, we'll put that session in the show notes because I think that's important to do that. It's a concept called profits first. And I don't want to dive into too much detail of that. But when I talk about freedom of money, it's getting to the point that you're making money, that your business is making money, but now money is no longer holding you back, if that makes sense. So what about, I'll come back to you. Does that make sense, what I just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the freedom of money is, I think, obvious to a lot of people because having to think about money in every little decision that you need to make, and sometimes money is even an issue. Like people are worried about what they're gonna eat. It's a daily hustle. So that is definitely not the freedom of money. The freedom of money is to be free, like to get the money out of the way. And in the business context, you need a little bit more money than you would need in just like your personal life because you've got all the other responsibilities. I know we talked about this concept, but it might as well be good to refer to it. When you pay yourself first, this will push you to kind of like create alternatives and be really creative of being able to secure that budget that you are fulfilling your responsibilities. So I remember I was in a situation that I had this project and I had people who were working with me on it. And at some point, I couldn't move forward. And I was feeling so guilty, not because I had to stop it, but because I had to tell these people who were working with me that I can't do this anymore. And I would even help them to find other alternatives and like this. But it was like such a huge feeling of guilt that they committed to me and they're helping me. And now I kind of like I'm failing them. So that is definitely not the freedom of money. So yeah, I think freedom of money is really clear concept for me. It means that you don't have to be trapped thinking about money in every little decision that you are making.
Yeah, and the freedom of money helps you move from being what I would call reactive to proactive, right? It helps you go from freedom from to freedom to. And what I mean by that is, hey, listen, here's the deal. I'll talk about this a little bit. For a lot of entrepreneurs to the outside world, people think that they're driven by money, right? And, to an average person, and most entrepreneurs out there, they're not driven by money. Of course, money is important. Money is a reflection of value creation and things like that. But the vast majority of entrepreneurs are driven by a lot more than just money. Yes, you've got a couple, some that are, and, they want the nice house and the car and, all the prestige that comes with that. But those are, at least I don't spend a lot of time with those entrepreneurs because that's kind of boring, right? You're like, okay, whatever. You got the car, you got the house,
I mean, what after you get all that, then
exactly.
What keeps you going?
Well, more and more money for those guys, but
okay.
But a plane or God knows what. But for most entrepreneurs, that's not really what's driving them. It's making meaning. It's leaving their fingerprint in this world. It's having an impact and doing something like that. And in order to get there, you need to get to the point where you have a profitable business, right? And you're able to say, okay, great. Now I want to be proactive, or now I want to be creative, and I want to go out and I want to create these other things. And it's not for the sake of getting more money. It's for the sake of saying, wow, this is interesting, or I want to have a bigger impact, or wow, something like this would happen. But sadly, many entrepreneurs don't get to that point. But when you get to that point, you have the ability to go and you can create. You become a lot more proactive than reactive, when you do that. So that's kind of the freedom of money that we talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could be either ways. Like it could be like you're driven by purpose, and then this purpose pushes you to create a service or to create a product that starts generating money. Or it could be like you're driven by the freedom of money, and then at some point you reach a point that you're like, okay, so how can I create an impact? And you obviously, in a lot of times, but not all the times, you need money to be able to create an impact. I mean, don't get me wrong, because a lot of people are creating impact without really having money, right? But I mean, in this society nowadays, in the world that we live in, yes, sometimes you will need money to create an impact.
Yeah, and if you've got the freedom of money, and to be fair, when I talk about freedom of money, it doesn't have to be a lot of money, but you have to have that freedom.
At least to get your basics covered.
Yes, yeah.
Whatever you consider basics, right?
Yeah. For somebody, they might live a really expensive lifestyle. That's fine. For somebody else, they might live a pretty simple lifestyle, and that's fine. But do you have that freedom of money? And there are some let me just use, these words. There are some poorer people that have the freedom of money, and there are some richer people that don't have the freedom of money because they're hostage to money. And so again, it's an interesting concept when we talk about freedom of time and freedom of money. And what I find is a lot of entrepreneurs have experienced success and they have the freedom of money, but they don't have the freedom of time. They've become hostage to the business. But what's really cool is when you've got that freedom of money, you're able to really, in third point and the fourth point, the freedom of relationships and the freedom of purpose. So let me kind of get to the freedom of relationships.
David, I want to add something. That situation that I have been through, that I was at the point that I had to let go of, the people working with me, my team, made me really change my mindset about my business. So I was at the point that, okay, so the business is running, and from it, I'm able to pay salaries, right? But then when that situation happened, I realized that no, first I have to be sure that the business is established, it's not going to fail, it's not going to stop. It is big enough that I ask more people to join me in my journey. So that was what happened to me. I just felt like I really changed perspective because of that situation. Because at the beginning, my idea was okay, so you start a business and then, okay, you have profits. So from these profits, I was able to pay the salaries, but the business was still not at the point that it's stable enough. So I felt like I had a team too early, and then it was really painful to let go of them. And that made me realize that the business sustainability and creation and existence is much more important than expanding. I felt like I expanded quite too early.
It's a good point. And, one last thing on the freedom of money, and we don't think about this, is if we're too busy taking care of everybody else that we forget to take care of ourselves, right? And my experience is, the vast majority of entrepreneurs are too selfless rather than too selfish. Because we've got this big idea and these big things that we want to accomplish. And just like when you go on an airplane, when you think about when they drop those oxygen masks, right? One of the things that they tell you is put that on you first, and then you can go ahead and put it on your children. The whole idea is you need to be in a position where you can take care of yourself so you can take care of your children, right? You don't put the mask on your kids first, the oxygen mask, and then on you. You put it on you and then on your kids. It's the same thing in business and in money. And really in many other areas, you need to be able to take care of yourself first so you can take care of other people. And for the longest time, I wasn't doing it that way, and it was incredibly frustrating. And when I started paying myself first, right, I get that first $10, and then I leave the $90 in the business. I came up with really creative ways to reduce costs. I came up with really creative ways to say, you know what? Maybe we're not charging enough, And so, the line that I use is if you can live off of $100, you can live off of $90. Figure out how to make it work off of $90, right? And things like that. So, and again, I'm simplifying the whole concept, but we'll put the session to the profit first in the link in the show notes so that you can go and you can listen to that whole session if this is something that resonates with you. So we're going to talk about freedom of relationships and freedom of purpose, and then we will wrap it up for today's session. And then, so this is going to be part 1 of 2, and then part 2 of 2, we'll talk about the other freedom. So point number 3, freedom of relationships. Let me ask you this, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, are you working with the team members that you love? Are you working with clients or customers that you love? If you're not, I want you to think about something. You're the one who attracted these team members or these clients in the first place. So I ask you this, do you have freedom of relationships internally and externally? Again, both with your team members and with your customers, or not? Again, I hear this all the time about, oh, these customers are a pain in the butt, I hate them, right? Or, I got this team and I hate them, and things like that. And in my head, when I heard the statement, I go, and to be fair, I was one of those guys too for a while. I'm like, oh my goodness, these customers are a pain in the butt, right?
Good, because I want to ask you, how do you attract the right customers? Because life is not, it's not like, so I don't like this, guy who's doing for me, whatever job, but he's really great at it. And I go okay, so I don't like your face. You have to go home. Life is not that easy, but sure.
To be fair, I'm not going to somebody and saying, hey, I don't want to work with you because you're female, you're a different religion or a different color, right? I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, we all have at some point, and customers that are a pain in the butt, right? They don't pay on time. They're asking for stuff and complain and this and
Complain a
that,
lot.
right? Well,
Yeah.
listen, it's probably not a good fit, and that's okay. And I will tell you, you reach a point of maturity in your business where you say, hey, listen, we're focused on this niche. We love working with this niche, and they love working with us, and that's all that we're going to do. And it's fantastic, right? And you get the occasional, hey, a customer or two or three, that are a pain in the butt. How do you fix that? Well, you know what? You have an honest discussion with that client, and you say, hey, listen, we've changed our model. We're doing 1, 2, and 3. We'd love to have you as a client, but this is what we're doing moving forward. Or if you're past that phase, you're very nice about it, and you just say, hey, you know what, we've changed our business model. We're going to no longer support you. Here's some other alternatives, and we'll give you the next 90 days to go and find them, right? If you've made that decision. So, at the end of the day, when I thought about that, I go, yeah, I was the guy who attracted those pain in the butt customers. So what do I need to do to change to attract the right type of customer?
So how did you attract them? Like maybe by the wrong pricing, you're attracting the wrong people, or by the wrong offering, or that was maybe in my case. Sometimes you realize that your pricing has to be adjusted so that you're focused on the right people. But I mean, share with us your experience. How did you attract the wrong client?
So part of things in life, it's a mystery, right? I don't have an answer for everything. Definitely pricing is part of it, where, if the pricing is too low, you get the wrong kind of customer. And again, it depends on the business that you're in. That was part of it. Yeah, you just have to tweak your message. I think, for us, the message was too broad, and then we customized that message to a very specific audience. And then it was amazing because we're just working with the right type of client that, they loved us, we loved them, and, it was great for them and it was great for us. So the first part of that is a mystery. I don't know why we attracted the wrong people, right? But to be fair, it forced us to change our message, which we did.
And I think as well, like being clear about your message, right? So this is my clear offering, and then if they want it, they'll go for it. So that's how you avoid the client who always want something more, or something different, or negotiate in a space that is not for negotiation, let's say.
The other piece of that is, think about gardening, right? When you've got a tree or a flower, right? You take out the weeds, you prune the tree, you cut off, the leaf so it can grow. If you don't do that, that flower isn't going to grow. And so how do you do that, right? So in your business, you need to make those decisions as you grow. There are customers or clients that are not the right fit anymore, and that's okay to prune those. Obviously, do it in a very elegant and respectable way, and then just move on. And so, but to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I always hope we attract the right clients, and sometimes we don't.
Maybe it's part of it. Maybe it's a part of it, because I mean, you need to experience it to know who are the right clients, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So on this one last point, and then I'll talk about the freedom of purpose. But Derek Sivers has a great line. I try not to swear when I talk, but this is what he says. He says, it's either a hell yeah or no. And what he means by that is everything he does moving forward is either hell yes, let's do it, or no thanks, I'll pass. And so everything in his life is like, yes, this is great, let's do it. Or I'm not sure about it. You know what? That's a no.
Yeah. That is interesting.
And maybe a different way of saying that is, in order to have room for the great in your life, you have to eliminate the good, right? Or, the neutral, right? So if you want a lot of things to be great in your life, you need to make room. But he says it in a way of, hey, listen, it's either a hell yeah, let's do it, or no, I'm not going to do it. There's nothing in between for him.
Yeah, hell yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I don't say that around my parents, so
okay.
But yes, so anyway, so freedom of relationships, right? And I think it applies to that. All right, and the fourth freedom, and then we'll go ahead and wrap that up, is the freedom of purpose. And what's really interesting about the freedom of purpose is each one of us is unique. Each one of us has a purpose deep within us. And my question for you is, are you just living life, or are you pursuing your purpose in life? So are you pursuing your purpose in life, or are you just busy running a business, or making money, right? Are you busy running a business? Are you busy making money, or are you pursuing your purpose in life? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot more to business. There's a lot more to life than just making money, than running a business. And I think it's an important thing to make money, and it's an important thing to run a business. But do you have the freedom of purpose? And it goes back to that question is, do you own a business, or does the business own you? And if the business owns you, are you able, it's probably difficult to have that freedom of purpose. And everybody's purpose is a little bit different, kind of like, Ruba, what you and I talked about. Your freedom of time is to be able to spend time with your kids during business hours.
Working hours, yeah. Like minimum working hours.
Exactly. My freedom of time is exactly the opposite. It's to only work during business hours, or maybe a little bit more, but then have the weekends and the evenings and things like that off. And so the freedom of purpose this is another great book that we'll have to put in the show notes. It was a nurse that spent a lot of time with people at the end of their lives. And she had asked, these were people that were basically, on their deathbed and they're dying. And she would talk to them and she would just ask them questions. Fascinating book. I can't remember the title of it right now. But one of the things that she said was most people on their deathbed did not regret the things they did. They regretted the things that they didn't do. And by that, I'm asking you, your purpose, your freedom of purpose, as an entrepreneur, are you able to pursue, do you have the freedom of purpose? And with that, these are kind of the 4 different freedoms we talked about: the freedom of time, the freedom of money, the freedom of relationships, and the freedom of purpose. So this is part 1 of 2. On our next session, we're going to talk about freedom from status, freedom from retirement, and then freedom from, as opposed to freedom to. And again, so all that we're doing is we're taking this concept of freedom and we're expanding more upon that. And Ruba, with that, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything else you want to add, and then we can probably wrap it up.
David, I would just sit and ask myself, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? Sometimes you gotta go and do something, and as you're doing it, your purpose will reveal itself to you. So sometimes I feel like it's okay to just do something if you're not clear about your purpose, because you have to find it out. The way to find it out is sometimes a little bit tricky, sometimes difficult. You just have to do something till you figure it out. So just lean a little bit towards your authentic part, lean a little bit towards what you like doing, and just try to figure it out. Because I feel like, especially in today's life, a lot of people are not clear. They don't know what their purpose is. They feel totally normal. They don't know what is driving them, right? So I feel like the topic of purpose is really worth expanding on. So from my little experience on that's what I figured out, that you don't just have to think about it, think what is my purpose, and you don't just have to go through all your history and try to analyze it and try to figure out how I felt and what was my purpose in that specific situation. You just need to lean a little bit more towards your authenticity, towards something that you like doing, towards something that makes sense to you, even if it means that you're going to do something a little bit unusual. And then the purpose will reveal itself to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I think we get too caught up in, a state of, hey, what's my purpose in life and this and that. And sometimes you don't know the answer to that, and it's okay. And motion is actually a good thing, right? You can't just sit there and meditate about the whole thing, and, for things to happen, right? There's a great quote that I'm going to share with you from Gary Halbert.
Oh, gosh, you had to.
You will accomplish more through movement than you ever will through meditation, right? What he means by that is, listen, it's important to think and strategize and meditate and all this fun stuff. But if you don't do anything about that, what's the point, right? And so sometimes you need to have that motion. So for the listeners that don't know, Ruba and I, I don't do meditation, Ruba does. We're always chit-chatting about that. And I found a great quote that gets my point, because I like to run and I call my running my meditation and stuff like that. But again, in business, the whole idea is you're going to accomplish a lot more through movement than just by thinking about that, right? And some people get too hung up on, let me strategize, let me think, but then they don't take action, right? And you need to take action. And that's what's behind that quote. I'm not trying to, harass you on meditation and things like that.
I mean, when did you find that quote? Just asking, like, how long did you wait to say it?
You know what? I had to pull it up off of my iPad because I couldn't remember it. I think I read it earlier this week. I can't remember, but it was fresh on my mind, so. Gary Halbert, you will accomplish more through movement than you ever will through meditation, was his quote. But again, he's not discouraging you from meditating.
Absolutely.
What he's saying is you want to have movement, you want to take action, you got to do something.
Yeah. You gotta do something. I mean, I'm the biggest bias for like meditation, and I absolutely love it. But I just feel like a lot of the times people are like, what is my purpose? Just asking themselves this one question, as if everyone's purpose is kind of like has to be just like one sentence, as if we are like Smurfs, the Smurfs.
Yeah.
So you have but we are people, right? And what's wrong with a person's purpose changing? I mean, I don't know. I'm not the biggest expert in that, but these are my thoughts on the topic. Like, what if someone's purpose changed and then it reveals, and then but we have to work on it. I feel like that is something that you work on regularly until it becomes crystal clear, or it changes to something else.
Yeah, I mean, move forward towards that purpose. If you get closer and you don't like it, you're not a tree. You can change. Go, change it up a little bit. And there's a bias towards motion in life, right? Get things moving, get things going, and things like that, as opposed to just, sitting on something and not taking action. So, but yeah, fun session. I think, we're going to have to break it into two parts because we have a lot we want to cover.
Yeah.
But we talked about the 4 freedoms today, and then we'll talk about the freedom from status, the freedom from retirement, the freedom from as opposed to freedom to on our next session. But I think the freedom of time, money, relationships, and purpose is what we covered today.
All right. So then continue listening to us, continue with us in the next session. But for now, we have to stop. So thank you for listening to this program of Riyadi Club, where entrepreneurs are the real heroes. And don't forget, you have something in this world, so rise up.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Riyadi Club podcast. And remember, you have something in this world, so rise up. If you want us to cover a specific topic, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, go to www.riyadi.me. That's RIADI.me. Thank you and have a great day.